Some stories are true, some stories are useful, and a few, the ones that last, are both at once, tangled so tightly that pulling them apart becomes its own kind of history. What you're about to hear is the most famous thing Jack Hayes ever did. It is also the thing we can prove the least. One man, one sacred mountain, a ring of Comanche warriors closing in, and a 5-shot revolver against a legend that was already old when he got there. Welcome back to the Western Ledger. I'm Lamar. Today, the legend of Enchanted Rock. Rise up out of the Texas hill country about 18 miles north of present-day Fredericksburg, and you'll find it. A vast dome of pink granite, more than 400 feet high, one of the largest formations of its kind on the continent. For the people who lived in this country long before any surveyor arrived, Tonkawa, Comanche, and others, the rock was not a landmark. It was a holy place. At night, as the sun-warmed granite cools and contracts, the dome creaks and groans. After a rain, flecks of wet feldspar catch the starlight and seem to flicker like fire on the summit. The people who heard those sounds and saw those lights had a word for the place. Enchanted. Not somewhere you trespassed lightly. Sometime in the early 1840s, Jack Hayes was in this country doing the thing he had always done: surveying, measuring land for the Republic of Texas out past the edge of safe settlement. By the tradition, his party camped on Crabapple Creek, and one morning Hayes rode out alone toward the Great Rock with his surveying instruments and a rifle, and, the story insists, a pair of Colt revolvers he had carried since before most of Texas believed in them. The Comanche saw him first, a lone Texan on their sacred mountain, carrying the very instruments of the people taking their country. And not just any Texan. Hayes, the one some accounts say the Comanche already knew by name. Cut off from his men, with warriors between him and camp, Hayes did the only thing that made sense. He climbed. Near the summit, the story goes, he found a depression in the rock, a hollow deep enough to put granite at his back and his front, and he wedged himself into it and waited. As tactics, it was close to perfect. On the open plains, the Comanche were the finest light cavalry in North America. But a horse is useless on a steep granite face. To reach him, a warrior had to dismount and climb, slow, exposed, one or two at a time, straight into his line of fire. And Hayes, the tradition says, had the one thing that made a single man the equal of many: a Colt Patterson. 5 shots, no reload. By Will Barger's telling, he did not fire until he had to. When he did, granite chipped and a warrior fell, again and again. Each time the attackers drew back to regroup, Hayes used a lull to reload, and the standoff reset. By the tradition, it lasted 3 hours. Every time the Comanche expected the long, empty pause of a spent single-shot gun, the moment to rush in, it did not come. And on their own holy ground, against a man who would not fall, the story says some of them began to wonder whether the mountain itself had turned against them. Hayes held, alone, until his rangers, realizing their captain was gone and hearing the guns, fought their way to the rock. When they broke through, the warriors who had surrounded him pulled back over the far side of the dome and vanished, more convinced than ever, the legend says, that Enchanted Rock was cursed. And that is the story. A lone ranger, a sacred rock, a miraculous gun, and a legend born whole in a single afternoon. Next episode, we ride to Bandera Pass, another fight the legend loves, another date the record can't quite pin down, and one of the hardest, closest, most desperate stand-up battles the Rangers ever fought. There is a narrow gap in the Texas hills where, the story goes, one of the hardest fights the Rangers ever fought played out from morning until dark. 40 men ambushed on both sides, a knife duel to the death with a Comanche chief. 5 Rangers dead by nightfall. About 10 miles north of the town of Bandera, the hills that divide the Medina and Guadalupe river valleys are cut by a single natural gap: Bandera Pass. For as long as people have moved through this country, that gap has been the way through, and, therefore, the perfect place to be caught. A pass is a gift to whoever reaches it first. High walls on both sides, a single line of advance, and nowhere to run but forward or back. Every people who ever used this country understood that, and none better than the Comanche. The pass carries old blood in its name. By tradition, it was called for a Spanish commander who supposedly beat a band of Apaches here back in 1733, a story, you'll notice, we also can't fully verify. This is that kind of place. Layers of legend stacked on a piece of ground that genuinely was fought over. Sometime in the early 1840s, Jack Hayes, by now a Ranger captain, fresh off arming his men with Samuel Colt's 5-shot revolvers, rode north out of the San Antonio country with about 40 Rangers. The plan was a routine scout, up the Medina Valley, through the pass, on toward the Guadalupe. This is the same handful of years as the Enchanted Rock story we just told, the early 1840s, before Walker's Creek, when Hayes was building his name, one running fight at a time. And like Enchanted Rock, Bandera Pass is remembered in loving detail and documented almost not at all. By the traditional account, a Comanche war party was moving south on a raid at the same moment, reached the pass first, saw the Rangers coming from miles off, and set an ambush on both walls of the gorge. And Hayes, the man the legends say was never surprised, rode straight into it. The only time, the old accounts insist, that he was ever truly trapped. By the tradition, the Rangers were perhaps a third of the way into the pass when it came apart. War cries from both rims at once, arrows and rifle balls from every side. Men pitched out of their saddles, horses reared and bolted. For a heartbeat, the finest Ranger company on the frontier was a knot of confusion in a stone funnel, taking fire it couldn't answer. And then, the story says, Hayes's voice cut through it. The order the legend has kept, word for 180 years, was to get down and fight. Dismount, tie the horses, we can whip them. They came off their horses, took what cover the pass allowed, and started to work. Rifles first, and then the thing the Comanche had not counted on. The Colt Pattersons. 5 shots to a cylinder, and by the tradition, 50 or 60 of them in that company, and every one a surprise. Understand what that meant in a space like this. A warrior who had spent a lifetime learning to count the Ranger's shots, to wait out the single rifle, then close in during the long moment of the reload, now faced men whose guns simply kept firing. In the open, the Comanche could break off and reform. Pinned at arm's length in a stone corridor, that extra firepower was murderous. The fight, by every telling, was long and close and brutal. It broke down into individual, hand-to-hand struggles up and down the gorge. It is remembered as one of the most bitter, close-quarters battles the Rangers ever fought. And by the tradition, it went on for hours. Not the sharp, minutes-long shock of Walker's Creek, but a grinding, all-day fight in the heat and the dust that ended only when the light did. And at its center is the story's signature moment. A Comanche chief, charging through the thick of it, wounded the Ranger Sergeant Kit Ackland. Ackland fired back, wounding the chief, and then the two men closed, grappled, and went to the ground together with knives, rolling in the dirt of the pass until the Ranger came up alive, and the chief did not. With their leader dead, the tradition says, the Comanche broke off. They fell back to the north end of the pass, and through the night the Rangers heard them wailing over their dead. By morning, they were gone.
The Rangers held the ground, but at a price. 5 of them lay dead in the pass. Many more were wounded. So many horses were killed that their bones, the old accounts say, bleached in that gap for years. It is a magnificent story. If you want the frontier told with the legend and the record side by side, subscribe to the Western Ledger and turn on notifications. I'm Lamar. Thanks for being here.